Hola, bona tarda.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to be here on a Sunday. It's not a Sunday, it's like a Sunday, but today it's Wednesday. Well, I promised to the brave ones that we will change the climate, but you know, we are living today this global warming and sun. It's kind of heavy, but you will resist. We're going to talk about cities and food. Food talk about our culture, about our territory. The cities also rely on the way that we have to eat. In the end, cities, they appear such a place to exchange. And food can be a cornerstone for the future. It can help to save the world or to destroy more the world. As one of our dear guests, the architect Carolyn Steele says, we opt for being consumers rather than individuals, and we are paying a very high price to have very cheap food. What's the relationship between the city, the territory, the food, the place we live? How we can set a relationship amongst the culinary arts, also design, and what are the processes and the consumption habits that go hand in hand with the future strategy, and to know the social and environmental impact are many of the questions that we'll try to answer today. So we're going to speak mainly in English. Those that need translation, you have at the back of the room translation devices. We have amongst us several guests. Sonia Massari, she's the co-founder of an organization called Food Design for Opportunities, Research and Knowledge. It is an organization known with the letters FORD. It's a non-profit organization. She's the director of the Future Food Academy, more than 20 years as a researcher, educator, designer, mainly working in industrial design and also the human's interaction with the food. Also sustainability, design thinking, and the creative methods for the agri-food sector. Caroline Steele, where are you? Well, as we say at the beginning, the price that we are paying, it's very expensive to buy very cheap food. She's an architect, an academician. She's a teacher, visitor teacher all over the world. She thinks about food and cities. She's very well known through the TED Global presentation that she made, and a lot of their books, such as Hungry City, and how food shapes our lives, and also Syntopia, how food can save our world. With this book, she created this concept of Syntopia, the place to eat. And we have also amongst us Vicent, Domingo, director of the World Center for Urban Food, known as CIMAS. She was also in New York, appeared in movies. She is a writer and author, loads of documentaries, fighting for development and disabled. She also created an NGO called Humania, very interesting, because offered a voice, and it was a digital platform for many institutions of the civil society, and it was selected by the City Council of Valencia for being the representatives of food in Valencia all over the world. We also have a food designer, Mariana Eidler. She's a director in food design. She works with food as an agent for change and the relationship with the industry and design. She's also a co-founder with the Ford organization, and also the manager and director of Arroba.Ford. And a very big applause for all of them. Thank you.
Bé, bona tarda a tothom.
Afternoon, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being today with us. We're going to speak in English and we'll try to translate. We have simultaneous translation, so thank you very much. We have an amazing panel, international panel, and we are going to speak in English. All right.
This chat, just of course saying hello to you three that are here. This is going to be a chat between the four of us. And I would like them to talk a little bit about what brought them to be near food. But before that, I will explain what brought me to be near food that Nuria was asking me before. So along all my life, food has been near me. I come from the graphic design world, and I do art direction and creative direction. So at the end, food is the only thing that we can design, that we can eat and makes it part of our bodies. So I design something, I design a cookie, or I design a fish, whatever it is, and then I eat, and that this becomes part of myself. So this is why I thought that food was interesting to go deeper, and food was interesting to be part of my present and future design work. So I would like to introduce you, the three speakers today here, and I would like to hear from you how you started having a relationship with food. Because in here we have an interaction designer that started into food many years ago, an architect, and an audiovisual man coming from different fields. So how come are you related with food?
Who starts me?
Okay, great. Yes, you, Vicent.
Okay. In my case, it's very, very easy because I was born in the city of Valencia. I remember my neighborhood, the end of the street where we play football, started what we call huerta. So when I went to the ball, I see potatoes, onions, or, you know, and my environment, my familiar and cultural environment was day by day like a Mediterranean culture related with food, you know, and it was amazing to feel. Now it's time to take potatoes when they finish the harvest. I remember when the farmers said to me, to my family, next Sunday morning, if you want to come to take garbellar, no? Exactamente. So I had the impression that the whole of my life was involved in food, and I couldn't imagine my life and the rest of my life having any other relationship with food in a very intimate point of view, you know.
Great. And what about architecture and food?
My story is a bit more complicated than that. I think there are two answers to your question. So the first answer is that my grandparents had a hotel. And so as a child, it was normal to spend every other weekend and every holiday in this hotel. And I would hang out by the kitchens. Why wouldn't you? You know. But I also remember being very fascinated by the way there was a service door covered in green baize or green felt. And through this door, you went from the chaos of the kitchen and everyone shouting and screaming and, you know, grease running down the walls into this, you know, antique furniture and everybody sitting around very calm. And as a very young child, I remember being fascinated by this door. There's a great power and magic in this door. And I had this magical ability to walk from one world to the other. So that's a little vignette. I then became an architect. Maybe this is also to do with the hotel, I don't know. And I was studying architecture and urban design. And I realized that architects tend to talk a lot about buildings and public space and, you know, maybe movement and so on. It's very abstract. And I'm from London, a big city, and I thought there's something really missing from the discourse. And I'm now going to spare you the story of my life. But suffice it to say, after 20 years of searching, I had the idea of describing a city through the lens of food. And maybe that comes from my distant childhood. I will never know the answer to that question, but when I had the idea, it was the year 2000, and I'll never forget it because I had instant chicken skin, my head stood up. I thought, you know, this is my subject, and that's, as I say, more than 20 years ago, and I've never stopped seeing the world through the lens of food since then.
Wow, amazing, amazing. What about you, Sonia?
We are learning from each other, so that's great to meet each other first and then learning. So in my case, I never thought about the fact that I was maybe working in the field of food in my life. I was an interaction designer, as you said. I was teaching design, but then I was teaching design in the United States, and I came back to Europe, to Rome, and someone asked me, why don't we create courses on food culture? And because in the United States, many food studies were starting. So what is really interesting to know is that the food studies, so the study of the food in a holistic way, didn't start in Europe, but started in the United States, where people were struggling about the food systems and asked the academia to find solution. So I was in Rome, and they asked me, we need to create courses on food culture for Americans who wants to know about food systems in Italy. And the questions they asked me was really like, what is food for you? And that questions came to my mind, and I had to think about it. And I was thinking about my region. I'm from the north of Italy, close to Bologna, where tortellini are made, by the way. And I was like saying, this is food for me. This is my family. This is my territory. This is my community. This is what my grandfather as a farmer was doing. The other grandfather was doing as a baker. And I say, this is for me as food culture. And that's when I started to teach food culture, helping the people to understand that food is not what we eat, but it's everything around it. And because we are designers, we know that we have to solve complexities, and food is maybe the most complex systems we have. I thought it was the perfect match. And that's why I started putting together, and I became what they call it, food designer, that we will have more time and occasion to discuss about that. So.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. I thought it was very interesting to know why and how they started getting together with food. So it's amazing also how we get together with our memories, and with the memories that from, like you were saying in the beginning, you three were saying, when we were small, we always had something to do with food. So also in my case, my grandparents also cooked, and then that came to me as a special thing in the moment. So, wow, that's super interesting. However, I would like to do something all together with you, and maybe some of you have heard already telling me this sentence, but there is a sentence that I really love, that it's from Eduardo Galeano. That in English it says, many small people in small places doing small things can change the world. And of course, we all listen to this and we say, yes, but who am I to change the world? And I can explain many examples of people that thought that they were no one, and at the end they did things that changed the world, and they became someone that we all know. So I would like all of you to close your eyes, please, for 30 seconds, and think about something that you really love to eat. So please close your eyes for 30 seconds and think about this something that you really love. Okay, I'm sure you already got it. So there's a sentence from one of Caroline's books that says, food arrives on our plates as if by magic, and we rarely stop to wonder how it got there. Did you ever think where it came from? So I'm sure that if you were thinking about spaghetti with tomato sauce, that I'm sure that someone thought about this. You're thinking about they came from the supermarket, and you hardly never think about who produced the wheat and which was the truck that brought it to your plate. So this is the subject that we're gonna talk now. And because today we have the chance to listen from these people that knows a lot about food and food systems and how everything works, how the situation is today, how this situation is going to change, not in the future, in the next present, and how we can all do very small little actions in our everyday life to help doing this change that we need to do, and maybe we don't know how. So this is what this chat of today is going to be about. So we will start the second part of this session talking about food in the city, because this is the subject that we were asked to talk about. And we will talk about food systems, food culture, and food design. So we know we're in a changing time, like I was saying now. We know, we all know, and we know a lot that we have a situation which is not easy. Let's say we need to redesign, we need to review a lot of things into the food systems. So let's talk a little bit about this, about the relationship between the food and the city and us. So which is the role that we people have into this relationship, and how food is driving our lives, even if we don't know or we don't think about that. So
Okay.
who wants to start?
Start again?
Okay, again.
Okay, I remember when we received the order to held in Valencia in 2017 to organize the encounter of more than almost 100 mayors from all around the world. Mayor of Amsterdam, Quelimane, Baltimore, Menorca, okay. So, and it was amazing to see how mayors, wherever the political option, share knowledge and solutions, because they are very pragmatic people, and they have not to hide something. Cities have no secrets. As I told you with you, I don't know where, in Holland, many times borders between countries are like scars, you know. Mm-hmm. So, in these years, I have discovered how civil life is related with food in a more deep sense that we could think in the first time, you know. And it was amazing to see how Quelimane had a problem. Like, we have a problem with nutrition, and how you do it in Toronto. We do this and this and this. Okay, let's do it. So it showed it to me, and we call it love is in the air. That spirit, we call it love is in the air. And it was amazing. And I arrived to the conclusion that I see day by day, that to talk about food brings people together. But if we talk about food in cities, or more correctly, if we talk about urban food systems, it brings together people, civil society, institutions, universities, public administrations. It's like a wonderful opera. It's like a wonderful public space where everyone is very welcome, wherever your area of knowledge. You are an architect, or economist, or veterinarian, or journalist, or whatever, or father, you are very welcome in that space. It's a magical space, and we have to keep it because it's related with something about the sense of pertenency, of belonging to and we are zoon politikon. Mm-hmm. So it's a very magical space. So I think it's related. It's more related. It's in the hand of mayors, as FAO knows very well. It's in the hand of mayors to capillarize rights to the last corner, to the last street, to the last neighborhood, and through food they could achieve it. You know, it's amazing. For me, it's amazing.
Well, we will go back to the politics later, but I want to hear.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, I would like to take it to a more fundamental level and just talk about, in a way, the discovery that I had when I had this chicken skin moment I mentioned earlier. It's quite weird if you grew up in a city. This business, as you mentioned, of not thinking about where your food comes from. And actually, if you look at the history of cities, there has always been this other space that doesn't necessarily get spoken about called the countryside, which actually feeds the city. And if you look, as I say, through the whole history of humanity, the question of how to eat is obviously our greatest shared practical question. And for most of our history, we didn't live in cities. We lived, I call it living in the larder, which is being a hunter-gatherer. So the question of how to eat then was quite straightforward. You just kind of pull the fruit off the trees. You go hunting if you are in a sort of that kind of mode. Often it's very seasonal whether people hunt or not. But ultimately, you know, coming together at the end of the day around the fire and cooking the food and sharing the food is how we became human. So when we move to cities, there is this kind of weird duality that we have to deal with because, as Aristotle said, we are political animals. And this speaks of a kind of divided nature in a sense, because we're political, which means we need to be together, and it's lovely to see you all here, and I'm sorry you're all having to stare straight into the sun, but you're meant to be looking at dogs over there, apparently. That's how the building was designed. But anyway, you're looking at us. Apologies. But, you know, we need to be together, to be the sum of our parts. We're social animals, but we're also animals, and this means we need nature. And of course, the more we gather together in cities, the further and further we get from our sources of sustenance. And this is the problem we face today. I call it the urban paradox, that more and more of us are moving into cities, so we're getting further and further away, not just in distance, but also mentally from nature. It's actually making us sick. it's destroying the planet. We can get into this in more detail. But also it speaks of, I think, a sort of thinking through food, using the lens of food to understand both our need for one another and our need for nature is a really powerful tool we have at our disposal to work out how we begin to address this paradox. And it is ultimately about bringing the city and the country closer together. That was the really, really short version of a very, very long story. But I think, you know, when you're talking about food in the cities, you are all automatically talking about a paradox.
Great. Very good explanation. What do you think about it, Sonia?
Yeah, and I would continue from the paradoxes. I was saying to Mariana that I wanted to answer with a keyword to every questions, and I wrote rethink, and then I put like no we need to think. That's the point. We don't need to rethink. We need to think first. And I'm taking the inspiration from my students from Illinois. I remember my first course, the students came to me, and he said, you know, after this course, I realized how much corn is around my village. And I don't know if you've never been to Illinois and you flew to Illinois. For 4 hours, there is only corn. This is the point. We don't see what we have around. We don't see what resources we have. He realized it because we gave him the tools and the keys to understand his own food systems. But he was living in the corn and he didn't realize it, how important was the corn for their life. So the paradoxes she mentioned are really something we need to think, all of us. One paradox, I think it's unbelievable, still in 2022. We died because we have so much food. We died because we don't have food. How incredible is this paradox? You can die for obesity or cardiovascular disease because you eat not well, and you died because you don't have food. Many places, and we don't need to go to Africa. It's enough to go in some neighborhood in our cities to find hunger. So this is incredible still. Second, we know how to make sustainable systems in the city, but we don't do it. How incredible and paradoxically it's sustained by us, by politicians, by policies, by all our action. The third is the waste. We waste so much resources. I want to say resources, not just food. And with those resources, we can feed 3 times, and we can get resources 3 times to the people that need it. Another incredible paradox. And we're living well, because we are all surviving in this world with those 3 paradoxes. So definitely, I want you to think about something. You are human beings, as she said, and as human beings, we are the one that will disappear in the planet. The planet will stay there forever. Also, if we will do bad things, we will eat badly, we will use the resources badly, the planet will find a way to survive. It are the human beings that will disappear because we will not have food to survive it. Second, we are citizens, and as a citizen, you can change the world in 2 ways, by voting and by eating. And I think we will discuss this maybe later when we will talk about policy. But my question is for you, do you need rules or values to change your action? Think about it. And third, we are professionals. And as professionals, we got responsibilities. I'm talking for myself. I'm an educator, and I'm teaching people to become food designer and changing the world. But outside, nobody knows what the food designer do. So how I can tell them, go out and go to a municipality and tell them what to do if the municipality doesn't know what is a food designer? Say, okay, do you want to cook something for us? That's usually is the approach to our proposals, you know. So I think we need to think. We need to start to think together as a collective and thinking that we are all living well in an unsustainable and unfair world. And that's my ending. I hope there will be a more proactive and positive moment, because otherwise it's too bad.
There will be for sure. So thank you for your point of view of everything. And now I would like to get into the how. How are we going to see these changes we are talking about? And then I would like you to introduce a little bit politics. We're not going to politics deeply because it would take like 20 hours to talk about it. But into the world that we have just described, in which I'm in a hurry and then I take away and I call any provider that comes to me with some done food, prepared food that I will eat, and I will have no idea where it comes from, and it will have a lot of waste. So, and I will say, oh, I'm very sustainable, really very sustainable. But today I'm in a hurry. I'm sure that all of you did this at least once. So every time we do this, maybe we should think about all the consequences about this. So we were talking about politics and municipality and majors. And of course, there's this like huge idea of the politicians that drive our lives, right? And it's been in this way historically. But every time more, I feel like we are the drivers of our lives. We have the power to do things, and if we get together, we can do things. And each of us in their little action can do things. So I would like you to share with us your thought about this, like two sides of the same coin, right? Us and politics and politicians. And of course, we vote them, but is this yet sustainable by itself or not? What do you think about this?
Start again.
Okay, maybe they
Okay.
can start if
go.
you
I'm
want.
happy to
Yes,
go.
great.
I'm going to just talk a little bit more about history than I maybe should in the last answer I gave you. If you look at the history of cities, cities were shaped by food. And this relationship I was talking about between the countryside and the city, it was like a dynamic partnership. And there's a wonderful fresco, I don't know if some of you know it, in Siena, Ambrogio Lorenzetti's Allegory of the Effects of Good Government, but it just shows the city of Siena and the countryside, and this incredible movement and trade and sheep in the city and hunters leaving and grain coming in on the backs of mules and so on. And it's a sort of, it's an ideal depiction of the way the city and the country used to coexist. But the interesting thing about the subtitle of this fresco is it is called The Allegory of the Effects of Good Government. So this is a recognition in the 14th century in a city-state that the ideal is that you maintain a balance between the city and the countryside, but it's not going to do it on its own. You have to legislate for this. Now, in 14th century Italy, most cities were city-states. In other words, I call it the fried egg model of urbanity, where the yolk of the egg is the city and the white of the egg is the countryside. And of course, all early cities were like this, or more or less. It's more complicated, of course, but we have only a short time. And in this condition, it's quite easy for, if you like, the city leaders or authorities to just keep an eye on one big market in the middle of a city and make sure, you know, oh, the fish guy needs to go over there, and just keep an eye. When we now move very rapidly to industrialization, to the arrival of railways, to this enormous kind of explosion of urbanity, and the fact that the fields that feed you are no longer just outside the window, but they're the other side of the world, you know, how we organize this as a political entity, who's in charge, is just a very, very, it's an impossible almost question to ask, because politicians no longer control the food system. The people who control the food system is the food industry. Now, this is a moment in history you can even trace, and there's good reasons why politicians were very happy to cede responsibility for feeding people to the industry, because feeding people is a politically very, shall we say, difficult, that's a mild word thing to do. People don't like being told what to eat. Food systems are very difficult to control because they are like organic complex entities, as we've said. So the condition we find ourselves in now is that politicians don't control the food system, and we can't really see or feel how food arrives because there's no longer one big market in the middle of the city where all the food comes. Although I have to say in Barcelona, more than in most cities, which is wonderful. But as individuals, if you want to make a difference to this system, it's a really interesting question. I mean, obviously, we can all say, okay, I'm going to eat organic muesli for breakfast tomorrow rather than industrial bacon. And we know, I think everyone in this audience knows now, by now, that industrially produced meat is incredibly ecologically damaging. So that is wonderful, and that makes a real material difference. And when many people do that, that becomes something even that the food industry itself will respond to. because they think, oh, we need a shelf for almond milk because people, are demanding it. So that's fantastic. But we still cannot get where we need to get without political involvement. So I would say also a bit in the spirit of Sonia, think about whether you need values or rules. We need both, obviously. Values you can change yourself. And we've inherited a set of values from a very distant time. I'm just going to, in shorthand, call it industrial capitalism. And by the way, this system is a system that pretends or thinks or assumes that nature is infinite and comes for free. And food is a very interesting mirror to sort of look through and understand how crazy that is as a system. But so we need to change our values and stop valuing money and start valuing food instead. But the other arm, the rules bit, we cannot get there without rules. And this can only be done politically. And so we also need to be political in the way, not only we eat, but the way we demand our politicians take responsibility for food. They have parked it in a kind of, as Tim Lang, a sort of very famous food policy guy in the UK calls it, the British government attitude to food is leave it to Tesco. So this is not an adequate policy. So we need to demand that our politicians get involved in food again.
Great.
When you were making the question, suddenly brings to my mind Schumacher. Not Michael Schumacher, Ernst Friedrich Schumacher. Wonderful story, Schumacher. Very related with Keynes. He brings from small is beautiful. As much strong is a system, more value has its correct resquicio. How do you say resquicio? Correct.
I don't know that word.
Resquicio, no?
Well,
crack.
Yeah,
no?
the
Split.
Yes.
Split. As much strong is a system, more value has as
when you break it.
So, of course, we live in a hurry. We have no time for anything. But every little action, every step in the way to have something close to what we call conscience feed, or more correctly, citizenship feed, in the sense I'm part of this community, will be very, very welcome. Even to think what I'm going to eat tomorrow. I love to think what I'm going to eat tomorrow. I feel like Pavlov dog in the sense of, how much I don't fish with this, no? So, and suddenly it brings us to a very special role of our identity, in the sense, this is wonderful, now we are in winter time, how many times I didn't go to that old town to eat this, and you are building day by day your own identity, and you feel more comfortable, you feel part of this. On the other side, I remember when I was working in New York, and it was terrific for me to see. I was working with some people that when arrived time to lunch, every time seeing the screen, and they didn't see what they're eating, doing this. Oh my God, this was for me from Valencia, it's criminal, no? So we have 3 times by day the wonderful opportunity to think, what did I eat yesterday? How wonderful is this? What I'm going to eat tomorrow? And it brings me some wonderful remembers when I was to my grandfather's days. So that little crack is wonderful, and it brings us value and dignity, a part of a wonderful life, And children, they are very conscient that we do that. Children are very conscient when something is really serious, more than many other people.
Yeah, I guess the children is a good example.
Yeah, and to answer with the keywords, my keywords will be education, but not in the common sense of education. I don't think we are now talking about how much education about food we have to do in school, because this is quite well known, and this is something we don't know. We don't do, but it's very well known. I think we need to educate all the levels of the food supply chain. In those food supply chain, I put also the policymakers, okay? To be clear on the fact that in the food supply chain, policymakers are part of, are not out of. And many times the policymakers are out of, and we ask them to see what we consider in the food supply chain that works well. Let's bring them in, okay? The role of the designer many times is to not convince, but to bring people to see the future where they cannot see the future. This is exactly what we do every time we design something that doesn't exist, and we need the people to think about that a different world can happen. So how we do that? Without rules, without manifestos or something, we do this through tools, products, services, and systems. We create those educational tools to teach people, all layers, I told you, about the importance of food. I really believe in a sustainable, what I'm calling a sustainable natives world. If you think about digital natives, are your kids that don't need any instruction to use a digital device. They are born in a world where they take an iPad, they can do everything. Guess if we're going to live in a world in which you don't need instruction to be sustainable, because everything that is designed to be sustainable. Is it this possible? The designer works for that. But it's also true that we need to be conscious on the fact that sustainability is not a value for the people nowadays. It's something we talk, it's a very abstract concept, but it's not a value. It's like a little fire, and we put some, we feed the fire to see this fire becoming bigger, but it's still very little. And I want to bring a very concrete example. During the lockdown, we did a research, and we analyzed the report all around the world, developing and developed countries, just to be concrete also in the way how the research was done, about food waste. And guess, the numbers and the reports are telling us that people were wasting less. In the cities, people were wasting less. Now you're saying, well, they were stocked in the house, so they didn't waste. No, it's not true, because if you're stocked in your house, you need to get more food. You don't know how much food you need. You are struggling because maybe the supermarket will be empty. Do you remember the first week of the lockdown? Everybody running in the supermarket, bringing food, like there was the big calamity and nobody could have food anymore. That's what we were expecting. But instead, people learned. People learned three things. To make a shopping list, I'm serious. This is scientifically based on report. But people learned how to do shopping lists, how to make the list of the things they needed. Second, they learned how to conserve, because they did have so much food in their house and they couldn't go out 3 times a day to change and to buy. So they had to put it in the fridge, but nobody knew how to put stuff in the fridge correctly. So they went to the tutorial. Check the visual of tutorials about how to conserve in the fridge chicken or something else. They're like top in the lockdown. And third, they started learning about season, because many short chain service, so food delivery in short chain, were very active during lockdown. And people, instead of using big e-commerce, decided to take the community short chain delivery. And they learned that tomatoes are in the summer, and they were not able to get so much tomatoes in March. Or maybe they got tomatoes without taste. So they learned it. I strongly believe getting and learning from emergency like that for a designer are like pearls, because we can create a tool that helps people to do a good shopping list, or we can help them to do a good shopping list, or we can help them to conserve concretely and in a better way inside of the fridge. That's what we can do. So we will design the sustainable city we are envisioning, but we are not creating yet.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and brings me to the last part of the chat, which will be about the future is now. I mean, we are all talking, and I'm sure you all listen to the future of food. How will we feed our cities in the future? But if we do not work today, future won't be the way we would like we will envision, like Sonia was saying. So how do you think, or do you have any examples of things that all these people and people that can watch maybe later the video could do? What any regular people like living in that apartment, what we could do, each of us? Can we tell all these people some small examples of things that we can do, or maybe other examples also of people that did things that changed our present in order to build a better future?
When we start to set up the CEMAS, World Sustainable Urban Food Center of Valencia, I make many trips, many travels to many different places in order to ask to the others, to experts in FAO, universities, what is this exactly about? And then we discover 34 different areas of knowledge that they are interacting between themselves, you know? And I was very proud to show to FAO people and say, oh my goodness. And suddenly we start to talk about procurement, climate change, migrations, gender policies, food waste, and I will say to the people, to the wonderful family,
These people before they came to see us.
the audience,
Yes.
wonderful audience of Barcelona,
Great.
that it's wonderful when you arrive to the conclusion that the option of feed I'm choosing is related with many other things, you know. It's like a planetary system where a planet interacts with it. Does Mercury interact with Jupiter? Of course it does. If I choose this option, this wonderful cooperative of women close to Barcelona, if I prefer to eat today this, or it's wonderful. If I prefer go to this wonderful town close together, urban-rural linkages between many other planets of knowledge. It's great to feel part of that wonderful opera, you know, in order to, as I told you before, it's part of the challenge to be a citizen. More than nutritional facts, or more than that, more than think about obesity, more than, somehow I'm understanding to end. Last week we had a meeting about food waste, and we arrived to the conclusion that we have to forgive ourselves. Many times when I go to the garbage, I say, Vicente, I forgive you because you are doing this. But it is the first step for many other things. A couple of tomatoes, that's nothing. But I forgive myself because we were programmed, we were taught in a context that we have not the possibility to forgive to ourselves, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful first step for all the rest, you know. That's what I think.
Good. So concrete actions.
I think the first and the thing we can all do, and we can actually weirdly even do it sitting here, is to remind ourselves what food is. Food, and it's just so weird to even say it, but food consists of living things that we either hunt or nurture, but then kill, so we can live. So food is life. And if you just remind yourself that that's the case, then you will automatically value food. Because, as Vicent says, you know, when we waste food, that's, you know, a tomato on your plate is an emissary from another landscape. And it somehow got to your plate through what seems like a miracle, but actually an incredibly complex system. Or it may be if you're eating a bowl of soup. I often say, in fact, I did a drawing about this because I'm an architect, so I can't understand anything unless I can see it. But, you know, a bowl of soup is the universe. The universe is in that bowl of soup. And everything else, I mean, I've never studied systems thinking in my life, but everything you eat, every time you take a spoonful, every time you buy food in a shop, every time you give your euro to a farmer farming organically or locally, or, you know, sort of being nice, kind to his animals rather than torturing them in the name of cheap food or whatever. And by the way, it's not the farmer's choice to do that, obviously. You are making a better world. I mean, I have this word I should just mention, Citopia. And it's a word I invented, and it's from the Greek word sitos for food and topos for place. We live in a world shaped by food. And once you realize that, and you realize that food is life, and you realize that your bowl of soup is the universe, then you become a kind of conscious eater. Every food act that you make, and you can do this at any level. It doesn't matter if you don't have much time. It doesn't matter if you don't have much money. You still always have choices. And actually, food is also about pleasure. I think that's something very, very important to remind ourselves. So, as Vicent said earlier, you know, every time, 3 times a day, we have this incredible opportunity, not just to get pleasure, but also to shape the world better. Because that bowl of soup does have real effects right out. I mean, I'm not exaggerating about this universe thing, that of course the reason we have seasons and the reason we have day and night is because we're on a planet whizzing through space. You know, so it is a living, dynamic, constantly evolving system of which we are part, because when we eat, some landscape that becomes our food then becomes us. We are made of the food we've eaten in our lives. And so that gives us a kind of really strong inner power to value food, make time for food. We all have professions. We're not just consumers of food. Some of us in this audience are probably architects, planners, farmers, lawyers, you know, politicians maybe if we're lucky. And so there's always something we can do that is positive about food in our profession as well. If I'm a doctor, we should be... I mean, it's crazy, by the way, that doctors don't learn about nutrition and don't talk about nutrition. Planners can make space for food. Lawyers can legislate so that, you know, polluters pay, so that people who are farming well can farm better. All of it, mothers can cook, and fathers, by the way, can cook for their children and take time for it. Architects can design flats with beautiful kitchens that people want to spend time in, and they can refuse to design housing if there is not a market nearby, or the question of how are the people living in this housing going to live is not asked. So there's always so much we can do through food. It connects everything, it changes everything, and if we value it, it makes everything better. Mm-hmm. So I just want to encourage you to put on what I call food-shaped glasses and just see the world through the lens of food, because if you do that, everything changes. And I know, by the way, in Barcelona, you already kind of do that, and I'm from the UK, where we have a very industrialized food system. So I'm really, I admire and love the food of Barcelona. I'm just really saying, encouraging you to see even more, value even more what you have, and fight to keep it, because, you know, the forces of globalization are coming.
Strong, really strong. Great. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So Sonia.
So I'm taking another direction. So to add more things, of course, I agree with my colleagues, and I think also there is a part in which they cannot choose their food, and of course, to get access to food means to get access to good quality of food that has all of the qualities that we are describing, but there is also a big component of people who don't get access to food, which is something we need to think about it. And what we can do for that. I think I'm going back to the first question you asked. When I started working in food studies, the people in the United States were struggling because they watched Super Size Me or Food Inc. and they said, oh my gosh, we will be sick, we need to find a solution. Now we're not anymore there. We are not struggling because we will be sick, also if we will be, but we are struggling about something else. The point is that we need to start to be curious in a more activism way, or we need to be active, okay? I think we need to get to bring people to uncomfortable zone. Means that you need to start to ask. Go to restaurants and ask. Ask where the food comes from. Ask why they choose one ingredient instead of another. Make them in an uncomfortable zone. They will not like it, but next time they will do something different. Go to the canteen of your kids and ask them why they choose one food instead of another, why they don't recycle the materials and the food. Make them uncomfortable. The week after, they will change it. And do something concrete by opening the eyes of yourself and the others. Start from you, it's good, getting us first in the first line. But secondly, if we really want to make change, we need to bring people with us in this. I want to use really 2 minutes also because it was mentioned many times, Fork organization that we founded together with Mariana. And in the next 3 days, we are going to celebrate what we call it the World Food Design Day. And this year we decided to take the city as a key point, and we said food design for changing cities. First questions was, do we have good projects in food design that were able to change the city? And we had to sit on the table, and we got like 5 fingers in each hand were enough to say, those are the projects we have in mind to change the city. We need to improve, we need to help the people to understand how to collaborate, to bring together municipality, designer, innovation broker, business people. They need to work together. Otherwise, we will always have projects that are missing something. And if we don't work all together in this way, if we don't do this kind of advocacy, for us it's a volunteering works we do to get advocacy. The people need to understand that there are profiles that can help to connect the dots, to help to get food also for the people I saw down here when we arrived. We're here talking about food and they're there surviving. Where the food that we eat can go to them and create a system that can be circular and can be okay, and maybe they will not search for something because they will have a job or whatever it is in the next layers or vision we have about the food in the city. So I want to make it this not like an activist moment, but instead as a responsibility moment we have to take care. And of course, if you want to be part of the World Food Design Day, we are super happy to have you on board. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sonia. And thank you all. And I guess that we arrived kind of to the end of the chat and the moment of questions and answers. Before of that, I just wanted to say 3 sentences that I think that are very important to, like, at the end of this moment, things that you have said that I think that maybe can stay in our minds. So one is to talk about food brings people together. This is something that we all know. We all get together to have food for our birthday, to celebrate a celebration, or just to have business, or to do something, but let's go to the countryside to have these meetings, and let's understand how this food comes to us, to join us and put us together. On the other side, we were talking about the paradox that is very interesting and important to keep in mind, because we all have a lot of food surrounding us. If we want to have something to eat, we go to anywhere in here near, and we have. But there's a lot of people that's dying because they don't have food. So this paradox about dying because you eat too much or dying because you do not eat, there's a lot of gray scale in the middle that needs to bring us to do things so that this won't happen anymore, or at least little by little will bring us to there. And then just to close this sentence, that we have 3 opportunities at each day, 3 moments each day to think about how the way we eat will shape our present, ourselves, and our future, and so our cities. So thank you very much for being here today, and I would like to know if there's any of you that has any question for any of us.
And thank you, Mariana, for moderating
Hey, thank
us.
you, Mariana.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mariana.
So thank you very much. I see someone, there's a question over there, so if you can bring the
We need
microphone.
translation.
Okay, so we will join 3 questions, and then we will answer.
Hola, buen
Hola.
día.
I can ask in Catalan, right? Yes.
Do it in Spanish.
In Catalan. In Catalan, it's great. Okay, you were talking about cities as consumers. We take our food from the countryside, the surroundings. My question is the next one. What happens with cities as centers of production? Is there any kind of possibility to a city to be a center of production, a production hub? It's very difficult after reading writers such as Fukuoka. We need loads of services for the food sovereignty, right? So this is my question.
Si hay otra pregunta.
I don't know if we have another question. Yes, we'll gather 3 questions.
You don't?
Hola.
Sentito direttamente.
Hello, my name and thanks for everything. I really enjoyed it. And I would like to, I think that we have the point here. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
I'm
So
very
I can see your
shy.
face.
And I think that all of us here are actually conscious about the need of a big change in the food system. However, I think that, the governments have to change, implement rules, etc. But the big problems are actually the companies. And I think that the governments have to really refrain companies from those advertisements, etc. But the other part is the consumers, and us as a consumers, I think the big thing is that how do we change the mindset? And that I think that is the big question, yeah? How do we change the mindset when we are used to what we have now? And I'd like to make that question, actually to you and to everybody. And maybe a possible question would be like, consider ourselves as food activists, and explain that in our neighborhoods in Barcelona we have, I don't know, groups alimentaris, like cooperatives, agriculture, etc. And perhaps we can explain everybody in our neighborhoods in a little scale, where the places where they can actually get this kind of food, etc. And also by the municipality, we have big maps in the internet of each neighborhood, where you can see where you have access to all these points, these places, yeah? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if there is a third question, we will, okay, there's a question here. Thank you.
Hi. How do you imagine the future of food packaging?
Packaging.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for these questions. Just a fast reminder. So the city as a place to produce, not just the countryside. To be a food activist, and how would you change the mindset of the people, and the future of packaging, that I guess it means how we transport all this food that we don't know how to, because it's, of course, we know we don't know how to yet. So you say yes, you want to answer?
Yeah, I'm nodding a lot. I'm happy to speak. Of course, all of these questions are connected, and that's the thing about food. It connects absolutely everything, not just the sort of subject areas, but also at different scales. So to take the question about the productive city first, thank you very much. It's a very important question. You know, I was talking earlier about the urban paradox. And the fact that cities have always evolved with countryside. Well, that's not the entire story, of course, because actually, historically, cities were incredibly productive. In fact, one of my favourite anecdotes about London is that in the mid-19th century, there was a piggery in Kensington. If you know London, you know this is one of the poshest parts of London, where there were 3 pigs to people, and that people were living under the beds and so on. So we have had a huge amount of food production in the past. And it's sort of slower? So no, sorry. I thought I was talking too fast. I usually do. And I think there are lots of lessons in our past as well. Fruit and vegetables were typically grown around the city. Why was this? Well, fruit and vegetables were very difficult to transport far, so it made sense to grow them in the city fridges. And also, fruit is much more delicious if you eat it quickly. And you don't have to, as we currently do in the UK, gas apples so that they can be brought, you know, in an edible state from New Zealand, and all the other insane things that we do. So, of course, this is where your question starts to feed into the gentleman's question about packaging. I think the future of packaging, I mean, there's two things to say about that. The first thing to say is that we obviously have to either stop using plastic or invent plastics that are biodegradable. There's a huge amount of work going on about this at the moment, but it's still work in progress, as it were. But of course, if you imagine the historic food system again, a lot of food didn't have to go very far. I mean, you know, if you live in Barcelona and you're close to a food market, you can just take a basket and you can buy fruit directly out of a canister and stick. Canister isn't a word in English, sorry. You can take the pallet, straight out of the pallet into your basket. So we get rid of food waste. So in a way, the whole packaging, the whole question of what's going to happen to packaging, you cannot disassociate from how we're going to produce the food of the city. By the way, just back to the pigs for a second, it makes a lot of, if you're going to eat meat, then it makes sense to do what we did historically, which is to have the animals as part of a logical, ecological system. The reason pigs used to live in cities, and chickens as well, is because they're omnivores, so they could eat the food scraps that Vicent was trying to forgive himself for throwing away. So then you start to solve the food waste problem. You know, so all of these things are systems, they're all connected. How do we change the way we think about food? You're absolutely right, it's a cultural shift that we have to make. I mean, for me, I've been, you know, really banging on about this stuff for 20 years now. It's changing really fast. Yeah. I mean, my first book, Hungry City, came out in 2008. That's 14 years ago. There was very little interest in Mediterranean countries. Why was, and by the way, I don't feel any resentment at all about this. The reason why there was not interest is because the problems I was talking about then had not yet happened in Italy, Spain, Portugal. They were not visible. Yeah. 14 years later, they are visible. Yeah. So this tells you things are changing. So that's obviously a shame. That's bad. But it's wonderful to see you all here because there's a lot of interest. This is very important. But secondly, climate change is no longer a theoretical future. It's here. But mass extinction, the loss of insects and birds in the environment is happening now because of chemical farming, so it's already here. So the arguments that politicians may be used to use as an excuse not to do anything, or, oh, the food industry will look after it, these are no longer viable. So this, I think, gives power to the kinds of projects that, you know, Sonia was mentioning, that, you know, we can, or indeed Mariana, have I said that right? I'm terrible with names. You know, about maybe joining a local food co-op, or, you know, getting involved, just actually thinking about how can I connect what I do personally to bigger networks, which can go up, as it were, to authorities, they can go sideways to your neighbors, and so on. It's making it more possible to frame those narratives as answers to bigger questions that are unignorable. So, in other words, it's no longer, oh, wouldn't it be nice to eat organic food? No, it's our species is not going to be here at the end of the century if we don't go organic. So this gives us, the kind of people who want to affect change, a lot more power, I would say, than we had even 10 years ago. And that, to me, is very exciting and very positive.
Amazing. Great. Thank you,
I'll be very
Caroline.
quick, very quick. About the food production in cities. It brings me two wonderful challenges now. One is, there is a wonderful project in University of Valencia with a Faculty of Architects in order to make roofs, urban agriculture roofs. No? But on the other hand, there were other wonderful challenges to rethink urban-rural linkages, in the sense, in order to avoid the population in cities and towns around. So it's great to know how things are starting to change. No? On the second question was about policies and how in the neighborhoods can. But it's great to see, as she said before, now in Valencia, farmers can, from one more than 1,000 years ago, farmers in Valencia had the possibility to sell directly to the consumer thing. And now you can see 25 years ago, it was like to go by bicycle. Poor people, they go by bicycle. They have not money to buy a car, you know. Now it's plenty of life to go by bicycle. And it's amazing to see how families or farmers sell wonderful products. That answer connects directly to the third question, in the sense, it's time to rethink why we spend tons and tons of plastic for doing nothing. So, as I told you before, many different areas of knowledge are interrelating in a wonderful system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm starting from the farmer in the city, and I bring to you my shock when I started teaching food studies, and my students used to say, I want to be a farmer when I got the degree. And as an Italian, that everybody didn't want to be a farmer, and they went to the university for not being a farmer, was a shock. I said, why those people are taking a degree to become farmer, and us, we don't want to be farmer anymore. So the point is, we are going to an age in which the farmer are not only Gino, the farmer, 8 years old in his field. We got a farmer with policy from the European Commission say that they need to produce 35% more of organic food to be in line with the policy. We have a farmer who doesn't know how to use technologies, and on the other side we have vertical farmer like Jack. I used to call it Jack in my classroom, who knows everything about technology, who doesn't have an idea about plants, risks, and being a farmer. So the point is, we need to bring together Gino and Jack. Gino and Jack need to work together to provide the food in the city. So vertical farmer, fine, but also normal farmer, let's call it normal, together. And I'm a little bit concerned about hyper-local farmer, which are what you do in your terrace. I think this is something that we need to search more about it, because you don't know what is going on your terrace now. Second point, it's about mindset, and that's for us is a key point. When Mariana told me you have to come there and give one solution to the people, I was almost crying, because I don't know one solution. So I found the forum of the Eat Forum with like rules for eaters. So there was like choose healthy and sustainable and delicious food, prepare, diversify, reduce, embrace plants as a source of protein, go easy to meat consumption, support regenerative farming practices, and go on. I mean, this is not changing mindset. This is like something everybody will cry after doing that, because nobody can do it, everything. So my key word is balance. Try to find a balance that works with your life, but can provide something to the collectivity, to the community in which you live. You don't need to save the world tomorrow. You just need to understand what is in your neighborhood, what are the needs of your neighborhood. And starting from there, step by step, as he wrote in the dedication on his book, he wrote me, let's change the world step by step. So we need to be concrete, step by step. Packaging is one of the steps. That's the question. Before COVID, I had to write an article about the future of packaging. And I wrote that the packaging of the future was the eatable packaging. And COVID arrived. So it was like, no. Eatable packaging? No. We cannot talk anymore about eatable packaging, because you cannot touch the packaging and eating at the same time. So what kind of packaging we need? Let's reframe the questions. We need to rethink the entire food system, the entire system of production, to get the sustainability at the beginning of the chain, not at the end, when the consumer goes to the supermarket and takes the product. If we rethink the entire system, for sure we will have biomaterials, ways to be reused, something that can be used on the top of the chain to get packaging that will be affordable in a sustainable way. So let's, instead of focusing on a little things like packaging, let's see what we can do with all of the resources we have, starting from the beginning. Let's talk about sustainability from the beginning to the end. That's my
Great.
conclusion.
Thank you very much for all your words, for everything that you've said. And I want to close this session just talking about, with 2 sentences about education, because if we listen to everything that we have talked today, and we think about universities talking about food, about schools talking about food, I've just finished my PhD after a long period, I can tell you that there's almost nothing. So for those of you that are interested into that, there's a lot of work to be done, and I encourage you all to think about how are you going to balance your do and not do, to forgive yourself for doing things, but just act and change your mind in some little space of it that I hope and think that all the chat that we've had today can contribute to that. So thank you very much for being here. See you soon.